About 5 years ago, I started to notice something that I couldn't ignore. I noticed it on subways, I noticed it at restaurants, I noticed it in waiting rooms. And what I noticed was young children playing with their parents' phones, most notably the iPhone. This may not seem surprising now, but you have to remember, at the time, the iPhone was only about a year old, and the iPad wasn't even a gleam in our eye. So as someone who researches how new technologies can be used for children's learning, I needed to understand whether these devices were going to become an important part of kids' lives. So myself and my colleagues did a piece of research where we looked at the top-selling paid apps in the education section of iTunes. And what we found surprised us, maybe even shocked us. We found that almost 50% of those top sellers targeted kids. Almost half of the apps on this device that wasn't designed for kids, that no one expected kids to use, were targeting children. And it was at that point that I realized that touch technologies were going to be a game changer in the children's media landscape. And that's certainly proven to be true. So I'll ask you guys, how do you feel when you see children playing on these devices? Started with the iPhone and then the iPad and other tablets. Because as more and more kids started using these devices, we started to see more and more headlines like this, which is provocative, and this, which is negative, and this, which is downright scary. But where others feel fear and worse, I see possibilities and potential. Because I believe that new and emerging mediums can have an amazing impact on kids' lives when put to the right use. And I hope to prove it to you. So, I'd like you to take a minute to read the lyrics behind me. Go for it. Clouds away, on my way to where the air is free. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? How to get to Sesame Street? Wow, that was awesome. Sesame Street. It's a show we all know and one that most of us love. But what you may not know is that it's the single largest informal educator of children in the world. Have you ever wondered how Sesame Street began? About 45 years ago, an independent television producer named Joan Gans Cooney asked the question, how can emerging media help children learn? At the time, emerging media referred to television, and Sesame Street was her answer. I'll let you hear Joan in her own voice talk about what things were like when she started the show.
It's not whether children learn from television, it's what children learn from television, because everything that children see on television is teaching them something.
These days, we take the power of television for granted. But back in 1968, it took a group of visionaries to recognize that this power could also be used for good.
One of the things we wanted was to give poor children the same break that middle-class children were getting in terms of arriving in school with some preparation.
Sesame Street was called nothing short of a revolution in children's programming.
One. Yeah, one, yeah.
So I need to change the subject, because I'm not here to talk about Big Bird, and I don't want to be a big plug for Sesame Street. I don't work for the organization behind the show, although I used to. In fact, I'm not here to talk about television at all. I'm here to talk about play. But what I hope that showed us is the positive impact an emerging medium can have on the lives of kids when put to the right use. So now I'd like to tell you a little story. It's not an inspirational story, nor is it a particularly exciting story. It's just a story about a day in October of 2011. Now, two things had happened in about the year and a half leading up to this day and that had had a significant impact on my life, and both were born about the same time. I already talked about the birth of the iPhone and then the iPad, so I dedicated my career to understanding how these devices could be used for good. The second thing that happened was the birth of something much more important, or I should say, someone much more important. My daughter was born around the same time as the iPad, so at about 18 months was just starting to get her first taste of interactive medium. And I have to say, it was pretty cool for me to see her experiencing what I believe to be a magical world. So on this day in October of 2011, I was excited to get to work because I knew that the American Academy of Pediatrics was going to be releasing its updated regulations or guidelines around young children and screen time. Screen time is an industry term for children's use of screen-based media. Started with television, then included computers, video games, tablets, iPads, iPhones, anything on a screen. I was excited to see how such an important body would respond to the drastic changes that had occurred in the 12 years since they'd last updated their guidelines. So when I got to work and saw this headline, I felt a few things. Professionally, I was both surprised and disappointed, because what it means to be a screen had changed so drastically. But here's my big confession. Personally, I felt a little panicked. I got that same feeling that I get every time I open an email or read a headline about the 9 household items that are giving my child cancer, or the 4 things I should be doing to prevent autism, or the arsenic that's apparently in my apple juice. If you're a parent, or at least a neurotic one like me, you know the feeling. Had I done something to harm my daughter? Just the night before, we'd been playing one of our favorite apps together called Wheels on the Bus. She would swipe open the doors, and we would tickle the little birdie, and then she would run and get her actual yellow bus. We were laughing, we were singing, we were playing. But we'd been playing for at least 10 minutes, maybe 15. Had I shifted the course of her development? Had I done something to harm her? At the very least, would those precious 15 minutes have been better spent doing something else? Take a breath, Carly, I said to myself. You know this stuff, you study this stuff, you believe in this stuff. You had a beautiful 15 minutes of play that happened to incorporate a screen, and through both your professional knowledge and your parental intuition, you know that there is nothing wrong with that. So I took a breath and went back to reading the statement, which actually, when read in its entirety, made it perfectly clear that they were only talking about television and couldn't make a recommendation on the interactive mediums one way or another at this point, which is totally fine. But few made it past this stressful headline and the corresponding media storm that it produced. I know this because I started to get questions, not from industry colleagues, but from fellow parents, friends, family, moms at playgroup. I heard the panic in their voices when they asked me if my daughter lives a screen-free life, and I heard their relief when I assured them that she doesn't. Parents were being made to feel guilt and fear around this new medium, when what they really need is guidance. So for me, when I look at a headline like this, children should learn from play, not screens, it's not that I disagree with this. It's that it doesn't make sense. It's nonsensical. Because children today can play on screens. And I don't mean play games on screens, which is a little different. I mean play. Open-ended, creative, imaginary play. Play that wasn't available as little as 5 years ago. So, there are over 850,000 apps on the App Store. Some are good, some are bad. Some are magical, some are evil. I would say that most are mediocre. But there are definitely examples that offer either totally new forms of play or enhance existing forms of play for today's kids. And I'm going to give you just a few. This is an app called Dandelion. Now, it's based on a story of a boy who uses his imagination to ward off bullies. Just like the physical version of the book, not only is it a lovely story with an important message, but what it does is it takes advantage of the unique affordances of the medium. So what I mean by that is there's one point in the story where the main character blows dandelions and makes wishes. In this case, the child is invited to blow into the device, and you see the dandelions blow around. And so it uniquely engages the child in the story. Now, this is totally different. This is a shot of the app called Wheels on the Bus that I mentioned my daughter and I had first been playing with. It's one of the first apps designed specifically for kids and remains one of the best. There's no game, no objective, simply fun places to explore. But the art is beautiful, the music is beautiful, and it takes a song that kids and parents know and love and brings them together in a fun digital play experience. This is a new app called Condoma, and it aims to bring together children and parents who aren't in the same place. So in this case, not only can the parent and child see each other, but they can both see the same book that they're reading. But what's amazing is they can see where each other are pointing, which if you've ever read a book with a young child, you know replicates the experience that parents and kids have when they're reading together in person. So this idea of bringing together parents or grandparents and kids who aren't located in the same place is something that I hope we can see a lot more of. Maybe we'll even bring them together around play in the very near future. This is sort of the digital version of a puppet show. It's called Toontastic. The child's invited to make up a story, any story they want, and then they record it in their own voice into the device. And then they can animate it, so they can bring in characters, and they can add music, and make their own creation. And then they can share the creation with anyone, with friends and family who live afar. So again, this idea of sharing more widely than your immediate household, sort of the 21st century version of putting your artwork on the fridge, is something that really resonates with kids and inspires their creativity. Now, I'll finish these examples with an app by a developer called Tokaboka. They're probably the most well-known developer of children's apps, and they call themselves actually not an app developer, but a play studio. They have a suite of probably 10 to 15 apps that are all based on traditional play patterns. So in this case, you can see the child has invited a friend and some other little stuffed friends, and they're having a tea party, a digital tea party. You can become a doctor, you can play house, you can have a tea party. And in all of these experiences, in all of these digital experiences, the child is totally in control of the play, just like they would be if they were playing with toys. Now, it's not that these play experiences are better than the toy versions. They're just different, but they're definitely new opportunities. So, I've talked to you about the potential that a new medium has to be a positive impact in kids' lives, using Sesame Street as an example. I've talked to you about the problem, which is that I think new forms of play are often haunted by a negative connotation that prevents them from blossoming. I've given you a few examples that I hope prove to you that today's kids can play on screens. So I want to finish with what I think we need to do. 3 things, or rather, 3 things that we need to remove. Number 1, we need to totally remove any positivity or negativity from the device itself. What do I mean by that? An iPad? It's not good for kids. It's not bad for kids. It depends what you do with it. If you use it to play Angry Birds for 8 hours a day, it's probably bad. If you use it to connect with a family member who lives afar, I would argue that it's good. If you use it to hit your little sister over the head, it's probably bad. It's the content and the context that matters. So let's refocus our energies from assigning positivity and negativity to the device and defining what makes positive experiences and negative experiences for the kids playing on them. Number 2, we need to remove the term screen time from our vocabulary. All screens are not equal. A television is totally different from a computer, and both are different from a touchscreen tablet. Any attempt to put all of them in one grouping is actually dated and archaic, and I would say that any attempt by an organization to assign a number to that dated grouping is lazy and actually doing a disservice to the exact audience it's hoping to serve. And number 3, we need to remove the notion of either or. And, this is kind of what pisses me off, I guess, the most on the topic of, when I talk on the topic of kids and media, is the idea that, because I believe that these things can be a positive force in kids' lives, I don't think kids should play outside. Of course. I do this work because I care about kids. We still want kids to make a mess with paint and play with Play-Doh and build with blocks that aren't virtual. But we actually need to figure out what is a balanced diet of play for today's kids that include all different forms of play. And let's remember that screens aren't always necessarily the junk food in that equation. So, in conclusion, what does it mean to a child to play? Is it defined by the toys and the tools and the materials that they use? Or is it about creation, imagination, and plain old having fun? Who are we to define what is and what is not play? Today's kids have access to amazing opportunities that under just 5 years ago would have seemed far-fetched and futuristic. What will be the next Sesame Street? Where will it come from, and what will it do? I don't know. But I can promise you that if we lose the negative connotation around children's digital play, we will get there faster. Thank you.